Okay, Biden, I've looked at your paper on whether or not giving Ukraine fighter jets could lead to an escalation or possibly World War III. I'm sorry to say that this paper has quite a lot of holes in it. That's okay. Let's go over it and see how we could have done better. Before we begin, Biden, I've noticed you've been getting into a lot of fights with the other kids. That's why I've chosen a role model for you. An example to follow. That role model being President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, otherwise known as FDR, a paragon of the Democratic Party, respected even by Republicans to this very day. One of his greatest achievements was passing the Lend-Lease Act. This gave him the power to supply nations at war with the Axis powers with tanks, planes, artillery, and all other essentials of warfare. I hope you can draw parallels with this, with the US providing Ukraine with weapons and other supplies to fight Russians. It's true that the scale of the Ukraine conflict doesn't exactly match World War II, but it will have consequences. If Russia gets anything out of this, it will embolden them to take similar actions. They may try to seize more of Georgia's land, if not trying to annex the entire country entirely after they've learned their lessons from this conflict and really have improved their military. They may even try to attack Finland and Sweden, as well as other places that do not have the protection of NATO. However, an important point to remember is that in both cases, official US military personnel did not come into direct conflict, choosing only to wait until they were attacked themselves. Of course, Russia has yet to attack us, although they surely want to. Okay, Biden, let's first talk about current events. Will giving Ukraine jets lead to the use of weapons of mass destruction or an escalation? Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told PBS in an interview that Russia would resort to nuclear weapons only in the case of a threat to the existence of his country. Say it with me, threat to the existence, and not as a result of the current conflict with Ukraine. Next, is escalation possible? The next pictures, viewer discretion is advised. I doubt it can get any worse than this. Now, you notice that Peskov hasn't mentioned weapons of mass destruction in general, such as chemical weapons, but we'll next discuss what red lines Russia will possibly draw for itself. Now, as to whether or not giving Ukraine jets could lead to an escalation of the conflict, there's already an historical example for us to follow. Ironically, it is the Soviet Union giving jets to countries the United States was already at war with. More specifically, giving MiG-15s to China and North Korea during the Korean War, and giving MiG-21s to North Vietnam during the Vietnam War. Putin has repeatedly said that his goal is to restore the Soviet Empire. So one way of looking at it is that Putin is trying to emulate past Soviet leaders. Except Gorbachev, he ended the Cold War. With this mindset, we can use red lines that previous Soviet leaders used to predict the red lines Putin has drawn for himself. A common theme is that they all wanted to avoid direct and open conflict with Western nations, because this would definitely lead to a nuclear war. As an alternative, they provided third parties with the means to fight the United States on their behalf. This included fighter jets. So, the question is, did the Soviet Union giving jets to our enemies lead to full-scale war with them? Let's look at the Korean War first. At one point, Stalin had promised Mao the USSR would handle the air war. However, he had eventually reconsidered because he was fearful of US strategic air power and wanted to avoid a nuclear attack. Repeat after me, he wanted to avoid a nuclear attack. So, to avoid this scenario, Stalin had reneged on his pledge. Repeat after me, he had reneged on his pledge to provide direct Soviet assistance. However, to compensate this, Stalin offered to give China more MiG-15s. He gave them more MiG-15s as indirect support. Now, let's conclude with the Soviet Union giving North Vietnam MiG-21s during this Vietnam War. It is important to know that it was not until August 1964 that the United States was officially at war with North Vietnam. They had been fighting the Viet Cong insurgency in South Vietnam. It was in August 1964 that war with North Vietnam was official. However, North Vietnam would not get MiG-21s until November 1965. That means the Soviet Union was giving fighter jets to North Vietnam, who the United States was at war with, after the Vietnam War had officially started. Now, what can we conclude with all this information? The Soviet Union giving jets to our enemies did not lead to World War III, so the same logic could be applied to the United States giving jets to Ukraine. I'm sorry to say that because of all this missing information in your paper, I have to give it an F+. But don't worry, I'll give you a makeup paper in regards to should the United States start drilling its unused oil wells and complete the Keystone Pipeline.